Ahi ahi Māori, ko Bridie Morrell tōku ingoa. Hi, my name's Bridie Morrell. I'm an independent learning and development consultant, at least until Hollywood calls, and I'm working with CHAR to look at how we can capture and improve your workforce capability requirements now and in the future. I have a background in working in central government, including on the COVID Tracer app, and I've nearly recovered, in local government, in the private sector, and at one point I ran a contact centre for debt collection. So that was an interesting experience at 27 years old to learn some of the challenges that our people have that you're dealing with every day. I particularly liked the ones that said, "That's not my signature, I didn't sign that mortgage." That's a worry. Somebody forged it. So today we're just going to have a really quick talk about the CHAR Capability Project, for which I'm the project lead. Welcome. I'm going to talk to you about what capability is, the benefits of a capability framework, at least what I think the benefits are, the steps that we're going to take to build the framework, and then in the last 20-ish minutes I'm going to download your brains onto the pieces of paper that are scattered around the room. I've turned them over for a reason, but I know some of you had a sneaky peek. Essentially what I did is I had a workshop with myself and I started contributing some ideas to get you started. Now I need to disclaim that I am brand new to the community housing sector. So while I lean left of left and am under no illusions as to the challenges that we have in New Zealand, some of the language that you use and the different types of community housing that you provide is still a bit of a muddle in my head. And watching some of the presentations this afternoon, I think it might be a muddle in some other people's heads. So let's just see where we get to. If I'm on the wrong track in terms of the headings on my pages, just cross them out, do something else, it's not a problem. You guys are the experts, hence the hands-on session. It's not for me to write your capability framework. It would be a very poor job if I had. So we'll get started. So the CHAR Workforce Capability Project is a strategic deliverable from the work plan, which I know you all have framed and above your desk. So it's the workforce capability deliverable, and I've been appointed to lead that piece of work. There are 3 work streams. There is the workforce capability framework. There is tertiary qualifications, so that is over time, and I've started the engagement process with Toitū Te Whenua Toitū Te Waiora, not Land Information, Bridie, and Te Pukenga to start that process, but it's a long and involved process, but we will get them on the New Zealand Qualifications and Competency Framework. I just said this, but the Workforce Capability Framework, and that will also lead to improved learning programs that CHAR can help provide to CHIPS. I had this big inspirational thought earlier that the new Prime Minister's name is Chippy. I think that's a good sign. It's also CH, Chris Hipkins, Community Housing, it's all the same. So now we're all going to do this, not really. Can anybody tell me what we mean by performance? It's not that, in a work context, depending on your work. It's a worry. So the performance, you can have the performance of the organisation, how well the organisation is doing, the services it provides, the products it makes, the things it sells, and the impact of that. And then inside the organisation will be the kaimahi, the workers, the employees, and they each have a performance. So we all probably know of organisations that have failed because of the performance of its employees. Obviously nobody here ever worked there, but we've heard of it in the news or in fantasy novels. So I wanted to be really clear that performance is how well you are doing at work and how well the organisation is doing, and they are connected. So because of my background in HR, I say performance a lot, so that's what we mean by it. We don't mean cool fire dancing employee today anyway. Unless you all get too much more bored and then I'll just change direction. So your capability, your workforce capability or individual capability affects the performance, which affects your outcomes. So I was in the finance section before and thinking, goodness, how are we going to capture that in a framework? All these financial terms and concepts that people need to know if they're going to raise $16.9 billion to fix the sector. We'll be passing around a hat shortly. So how are we going to describe what the capability is to be able to start thinking creatively and working with, what was it, positive capital? So just reinforcing how those three are connected. So behaviour and performance. I'm going to read the slide to you. So behaviour is how we measure performance, what someone does at work, how they do it, and what the impact of their actions is. The products or services of an organisation and the impact therefore, are impacted by employee performance. Behaviour doesn't just mean interpersonal behaviour. It's not playing nicely with the other children in the sandpit, although that's important. It means how an employee uses their tools or equipment, which could be computer systems, how they solve a problem, how they plan their workload, etc. In other words, it's what someone does. And if you manage people, you are watching kindly what they're doing all the time and checking that they're doing that right, that they have the capability. So we don't measure, actually, what an employee knows, what they wanted to do, or what they meant to do. We measure what they did on the job. Satisfactory performance ratings, i.e. being told you're doing a good job, and career progression is based on what you do at work and how you do it. So it's not based on what you know. I didn't promote you to senior manager tenancy services because you know a lot. I promoted you, congratulations, because of what you can do. So if everything else is equal in a fantasy world where your tools, time, resources and management support are kapai, then your employee capability will equal their performance. Lots of nodding and smiling, I'm imagining. So, capabilities. We describe capabilities by using behaviour descriptions. So behaviour is measurable and observable. It is not an opinion. You might have an opinion about the behaviour, but you can describe the behaviour. And another person would describe it fairly similarly to you. Whether or not they agreed that it's a good behaviour or not is a totally different thing. So because behaviour, performance and capability are all linked, we describe capabilities using a behaviour-based statement or an indicator. So congratulations, you can now work in HR because you can say indicator. So behaviour statements almost always have verbs in them, doing words. The behaviour description for a capability changes as the capability level increases, usually reflecting more complex and nuanced skill, and are intended to provide a reasonable understanding of what a particular level of capability looks like at the relevant capability level. We've got an example coming up so you can see what I mean. I was just explaining to my 16-year-old niece who was learning to drive and should come with a public safety warning that, for lots of reasons, that her capability is going to increase. So she will go from level 1, 2, 3, 4, and then probably backwards, and then back to 1, 2, 3, 4. And so that's what we mean about how you describe Poppy's driving today will be different to how you describe it in a year's time if she hasn't been arrested. Her mother has a siren on her car because she's a midwife, and I thought, I think perhaps we should give Poppy a siren. It's a side note. Sometimes a progression statement is used as well. So that details what an employee needs to stop, start or continue to progress through the capability levels. They're quite hard work to do and they need to be personalised to an organisation, so they won't go into the end product of this project unless you do raise that $16.9 billion and have some money left over. Might be a big hat that we need to pass around, Chris. But we will be able to give you some guidance on writing progression statements for your own organisation. Here's the example. So this is for a workforce capability that I worked on for Wellington City Council. I've taken out the council-specific stuff, but not that it's a secret. But so this is how we defined analytical skills at 4 levels of capability. I'm not going to read it to you, but take a minute, have a look. I'll have some vodka, water. Just kidding. All right, so you can see the difference. Know how to find and analyse information relevant to your everyday work tasks is way different from ask questions to explore other people's perspectives, support others to develop their analytical skills, and all the way through that. So an organisational psychologist, so, postgrad and psychology and stuff, helped us with that because they were able to help us understand the level of cognition and skill and that kind of baked-in stuff at the back of the brain to help us see how the capability progressed over time. So you'll see that if you've ever seen qualifications, level 3, level 4, level 5, all the way up, or stage 1, 2, 3, 4, perhaps for a bachelor's degree, you can see how things get harder. But they also get more nuanced and harder to define. And that's why you get a psychologist in for the hard stuff, because you run out of words eventually. Not me, I could go on forever. So, a capability framework is a document that shows all the agreed capabilities for an organisation or a sector. They include what capability levels there are, so I just did 1, 2, 3, 4 for the example. Description, or a definition of the capability, so it's usually 1 or 2 lines just to say what we mean by the capability to differentiate it from another one on the framework maybe. And behavioural statements, or indicators, that's your new word, of what the capability looks like at each level. Here's one the New South Wales government prepared earlier. So you can imagine approximately what local government does. They do approximately the same thing here as in New South Wales. And this is like the main page of their framework. So you've got some workforce leadership, that's fancy pants for management. Optimise workforce contribution, hire and deploy people effectively and apply sound workforce planning principles. Sure, I'll get right on that. But that's just a quick definition of what that capability means. And then they break that down. I'm not going to do the whole framework, but I just picked on manage and develop people. And you can see if someone's at a foundational level to a highly advanced level, what they're able to do, what we can describe, is different and more complex, hard, and takes practice. All right? I've yet to meet a manager who meets the highly advanced, but we can all aspire. Right, clear as mud. Good. Have some more vodka. Water. So why have one? Remember, child will develop it and then make it available to you. You can use it to inform your role design and description, your job descriptions. It will help you say, right, I've got a person, I want to hire this person and they're going to work at the foundational level of tenancy support services, for example. What does the capability framework say about tenancy support, if that's one of our capabilities, and how could I include that wording and descriptors into the job description so that it becomes consistent over time? You can use it for recruitment. What am I looking for? If I'm hiring a senior tenancy manager, they're going to be at level 3 on this imaginary framework. What does that look like? And then you've got some indicators, remember, that you can flip round into a question. Tell me about a time when you had to. You can start, when you do your shortlisting criteria, like what's the most important thing that this person needs to bring? You can look at your capability framework. So that's how that connects. Performance management. We've just banged on about behaviour and performance management and measurement, so that should be fairly evident. But once you get your people on board with the capability framework, and it does take a while to bake in, it took us probably 2 years at Wellington City Council to get it really part of the language, but they can understand what is required of them at their role level in order to be seen as competent or capable. And they can see what's next. So that helps inform learning and development. So if you have a centralised training budget or you have a particular focus of learning and development for your people, align it to your capability framework where you can, because you'll be able to see, in most organisations, cultural competency, or the equivalent, is something that people are working on for strengthening. And if you've got that defined, then those indicator statements are also your learning outcomes. So we need people to be able to do this. Training provider, even if that's yourself, this is what we need to train to be able to do. Look at all that nodding. Career progression. So that's promotion. It's moving sideways. It's secondments. It's all of those things changing up your career. And we're getting a lot of feedback through community housing providers that that's what people are wanting. How do I progress? I don't always want to be an admin assistant. I want to be the boss. Okay, here are the levels that we need to work through. And it helps you have those more difficult conversations around, I've been here 4.5 months, why have I not been promoted? Well, too much water. Reward and recognition. Well done, you've met your capability requirements. Maybe that comes with maybe that's related to KPIs or KRAs if you do that in your organisation. Maybe it's a pay bump. Maybe it's extra annual leave. Maybe you don't get budget coffee anymore. Whatever you're doing in terms of reward and recognition in your organisation. Anybody that's worked with me knows just coffee and chocolate's fine. And water. Talent management. More common in big organisations, big corporates, but looking at your talent in terms of your key performers, your higher players, your people at risk of leaving the organisation, people at risk of ruining the organisation. They do talent mapping and things like that. And again, you can align that to what are the capabilities, what do they look like. It gives you a common language and a common set of measures. And as a sector, it means as people change organisations and go between you all, adding more value, leading the revolution, all of that, that you've got similarly capable people and similarly aligned learning programs, career progression, that kind of thing. But that's a 5-10 year plan. We might all have drowned by then. And then finally, workforce planning, another corporate thing. But what are the capability requirements we need now and in the future? You could do assessment against people's current capability. Like I said, cultural competency seems to come up a lot. Collaboration, interpersonal communication, those are the types of things that we see in organisations at the moment. But if you do a big workforce capability analysis, then you can see, all right, this is where we're really strong as an organisation, this is where we're not so strong, and it gives you some intel about what you need to build, buy or borrow in terms of capability. All right? I think I need improvement on jokes would be my main capability development need. Ability to see over things. So how that connects back to that project, the Workforce Capability Framework, we've just done that to death. So when we know what those workforce capabilities are, we'll know what to bake into our tertiary qualifications. There is an existing one, the New Zealand Certificate in Health and Community Welfare, that's not right, but it's approximately level 4, but it's very health system centred. It is not tenancy or homelessness or community housing type centred, but it has some of the core and common things like partnering with other agencies, cultural responsiveness, appreciative inquiry, coaching for success, those kinds of things. So we may do what they call a new strand of that. It's like a new flavour. So we take some of the core requirements and then we add our workforce capabilities to it so that you can get recognised for your CHIP-specific skills. So that's one thing that we'll probably look at. We'll look at micro-credentials. Show of hands, anyone's heard of a micro-credential? Oh, awesome. So they are officially on the New Zealand Qualifications Framework now. They are recognised at a national level, more and more recognised at an international level. And it means rather than a full New Zealand certificate or diploma, which could be 1,600 hours plus of learning, and you get a whole lot of skills, but it takes forever and nobody ever finishes it because they're busy working, you get a micro-credential, which might be 40 hours of learning, and we can align it with something that you're already doing. So if you're already going to a training course to learn about the Residential Tenancies Act, and you survive, then you might be able to earn a micro-credential in tenancy management, for example. And the best thing about those is not only are they portable, just like any kind of New Zealand certificate or diploma or degree would be, you can stack them towards a bigger qualification over time. So if you're familiar with the NCEA system for schools, they take credits or points from different subjects and they stack it towards you getting an NCEA level 3, 4, 5. Apparently, learning to drive gives you credits. I think that's why Poppy's doing it. Look out, world. And then, of course, improved learning programs for community housing workers. So My task at the moment with the project is to get to the point where we know what our learning needs are and what you would like, how you would like learning to be delivered, and then we'll do a separate piece around what is it that we're actually going to deliver, when, why, and who's going to fund it. You'll need to, after you've done the first 17 billion, we'll just get onto that, but it's about making sure. What I've seen so far is a lot of people talking at you through webinars and not a lot of teaching you how to do something. So that might be something that we look at as part of this piece of work, but there's no point in going that far until I know what it is that you need your workforce to have. So the ability to scoop ice cream or to build Lego structures is unlikely to make it into the workforce capability framework unless you're very sneaky. So that's the kind of thing that we won't be offering training on. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you can see how the two align, right? So that we're using our money wisely, our time wisely, and we're partnering with training providers, which could be ourselves, to make sure that we're building what people can do, not what people know. You do need to know things in order to do. We're back to the road code again. Poppy, you do need to know the giveaway rules before we let you onto the road, but it's what you do that's going to have the impact on Colombo Street at 11 o'clock at night. So, we're heading towards the hands-on bit. So for this project, we want a workforce, a sector workforce capability framework. We don't want a generic one. I'll talk about that in a minute. So we want to know what it is that people in the community housing sector need in order to perform, and thus help their organisation perform in the community housing context. I'm thinking of walking around with a bell and yelling context as you do the next exercise, but I'm not going to because they wouldn't let me have a bell. More water. We're not seeking to include leadership or enabling capabilities. We'll talk about enabling in a minute, or capabilities that only very, very specialised CHPs need. So it's got to work for most chips. So an enabling capability is a capability that you could take to most workplaces, most organisations. So it's your core digital skills, being able to drive the computer without blowing it up, being able to run a meeting, being able to balance a budget sheet if that's part of your role. So those sorts of things, they're not important, but they're not sector specific. So that's why leadership, management, HR, finance, property, health and safety, and by property I mean like running the office type property, those things aren't going to go into that capability framework. All right, so please refrain. And we want to keep interpersonal or people skills specific to working in the sector. For example, you might define collaboration for in the community housing context to mean we might define that actually as partnering and use behaviour statements about effective partnering. Pardon me, it's too much water. And use behaviour statements about effective partnering with clients, whānau, support agency, etc. Can you see how that's different from a generic office definition of collaboration, which is ask other people around you for their thoughts, share the microphone, ask different perspectives, those kinds of things. That's important, but what does that look like in our sector? So how we will build the framework, and we're at step one, is we're going to long list absolutely everything we think we might put on that framework. If the framework was 450 pages long, what might be on it? Then, with the help of the project working group, some of you are here today, shout out, thank you, we're going to refine that. So we're going to look for things that are similar and group them together, and things that don't really fit and put them to one side. Then that will come to a shortlist. This is what we think our final framework looks like. We'll get that approved by chart governance. We'll get that out to you guys as members to put, your thoughts on and say, Bridie, you really have put ice cream scooping in there. I thought that was a joke. Then we'll define them. We'll differentiate that. So that's like the analytical skills one I gave you. We'll show what their different levels are. We'll approve and publish. And then everybody's problems will be solved and it'll be over. So this is your bit. On the reverse of the pieces of paper around the room, and there isn't one for every table, so you will have to move. I would like you to use the brand new coloured pens from the warehouse and the brain power supplied by Whittaker's Porirua to put down what capabilities you think meet the heading that I've put on that paper. You'll remember I had a practice workshop with myself, so there are some suggestions from me in there to help you understand what the topic means. If I'm really off track because of being such a noob to community housing, just cross out and say, go back to school, Brady. If there's something else that's not captured anywhere, there's an everything else page somewhere floating about. So the idea is we do this World Cafe style. So every 3 minutes, I'm going to say ding. Remember I told you they wouldn't let me have a bell. And I want you to move to the next table and start downloading your brain onto that. We won't have time to do the whole suite of tables, so do what you can. If you're really passionate about one area, like the social sector or housing tenancy management, find your piece of paper. And then that takes us to the end of the workshop with a little bit of a wrap-up right at the end. So if you hear me saying whakarongo mai, that just means come back and listen to me for the last 2 minutes. All right, go for it. Ding!